What we need now is an overview, and nobody better for that than my first guest, the celebrated international broadcaster, Christiane Amanpour. She's the chief international correspondent for CNN and co-hosts the global podcast The X-Files alongside her former husband, Jamie Rubin. Christiane was born in London but grew up in Tehran until the Islamic Revolution forced her family to flee. And Christiane, it's great to have you on the show at last. A kind of basic gut judgment call. First of all, do you think this is over or just starting?
Well, it depends on what you might mean by over. I think that if Trump puts enough pressure, certainly on Israel, with whom he has leverage, then the active, as the people call it, kinetic, in other words, the firing of missiles and the bombing, is probably over for now. But the question, of course, is that militarily you cannot take out the nuclear facilities, and the only way that there can be any security about what Iran is doing and what its plans are is by bringing Iran back to the table and engaging in robust diplomacy. And this is not a pipe dream. Yesterday, as Iran was responding, I spoke to three main players in this situation. John Kerry, the former US Secretary of State, who negotiated the JCPOA, the nuclear deal with Iran for the US and the rest of the world back in 2015. I spoke to Amos Yadlin, who's the former Mossad chief, external intelligence in Israel, and also to Hassan Mousavian, who's a former nuclear negotiator. All of them said this needs to be done diplomatically. We don't know exactly what they call the bomb damage assessment. We don't know if all these things that you just mentioned, the centrifuges, the actual capacity to enrich, and where is that 400 kilos of enriched uranium to 60%? We don't know what the actual result of that was beyond damage and a delay. So there is only one way, and it is negotiations with oversight, i.e. the IAEA and its inspectors.
I was told that Iran very recently told the IAEA that they had another set of centrifuges somewhere else the West didn't know about. At any rate, they still have quite a lot of their nuclear program. And as I said, the regime itself hasn't gone, must be feeling kind of furious and humiliated as well as worried. So it really depends upon what Ayatollah Khamenei, wherever he may be hiding, finally decides to do. But at the moment, it just feels kind of unstable, doesn't it?
You know, of course it is. And actually, this whole thing is in the hands of three strong men with their radical politics that surround them. The supreme leader, the Islamic revolutionary leader, Khamenei, Bibi Netanyahu, who's always wanted to do this action on Iran, but no other American president has allowed him. And he is supported and kept in power by his extreme radical wing, as you know. And the same, frankly, with Donald Trump. He is the extreme side of the Republican Party, this MAGA, and it's very, very radical in a sense. The policies, and it depends on what each of those do. But I think that Iran has indicated, and I've spoken to the deputy foreign minister, that no matter what, they want to come back to the bargaining table for two reasons. One, they want to, and they want sanctions lifted. And two, they have been weakened. And that is a fact, and that's a reality even before this bombing happened. And they were going into negotiations, and they want to get back to it with the United States.
That is about the most cheering analysis I've heard for some time, Christiane. I mentioned it. Sorry.
None of that diplomacy works, and the bombing paradoxically turns Iran into a rogue nuclear state and does on what happened to North Korea when, negotiations didn't work and North Korea basically pulled out of the the NPT and now has weapons. Iran still says it wants to stay within the NPT. And I think it was instructive. And President Trump, I think, reacted correctly when Iran did its inevitable response on Monday night. We were live on air when that was going on, but it was a very proportionate, in their words, limited in other words, and they even gave the US a heads up and gave everybody a heads up. So they got all their personnel and etc. out of the way. And Trump then thanked them for making it easy.
Yeah. But also in a slightly Trumpy way said it was a rather weak response, as if they should have done better almost. So in this very strange... I mentioned right at the top of the show, Christiane, that you brought up in your early years in Tehran. We speak about Iran the whole time as the mullahs, the regime, and all of that. But just tell us a little bit more. It has a very, very large, very well-educated middle class sitting in Tehran, many of whom must be absolutely terrified at the moment.
Well, they certainly were. It's released a little bit by the fact that there is this ceasefire, at least nominally, and by and large it's holding. There was a fierce exchange between Israel and Iran overnight as both sides got their last whacks in before Trump said, in 12 hours there has to be a ceasefire. And they both went at it. And today you heard he was furious with both of them. He's likened Ukraine and Russia to children playing, or rather fighting, in a playground. And he's almost likening Israel and Iran as well in his latest comments. But look, you're absolutely right. I grew up there, under the monarchy, which was its own authoritarian regime. But this is a completely different type because it has this extreme religious part to it as well. And over the 45 years, though, that religious part has been dissipated in the eyes of the majority of the people. And they are, by and large, mostly against the regime. They just want freedom and a democracy and relations with the rest of the world. Whether or not that will ever happen, or at least in the immediate aftermath of all of this, remains to be seen. But the regime does also have a very tough military and security structure, which to this moment shows no sign of flipping or defecting or doing anything but defending the regime. And the regime's key raison d'etre, or its key goal, is regime survival. So it will pretty it takes to survive. Hence the response. As one analyst said, Khamenei, had a choice between saving face and saving his head. And he chose to save his head.
Save his head, yeah. So looking ahead, they'll hunker down and they'll wait, and they'll wait for their opportunity in the future, which is why I think it's not all over. But for the time being, Christiane Amanpour, thank you very, very much indeed for talking to me.